we have the most Superfund sites in the nation.
The river itself will never fully recover.
The lower Hackensack River has been contaminated by mercury and other chemicals over the years.
One of America's most endangered rivers.
Part of the Hackensack River is now on the EPA's Superfund list, the most toxic site in America.
What they say is continued contamination of the Raritan River from an old industrial site.
I had an aunt and uncle who lived 4 blocks from Diamond Alkali. Both died of liver cancer.
New Jersey's environmental crisis began quietly, barrel by barrel, pipe by pipe, decade after decade, until the state woke up with more toxic waste sites than anywhere else in America. Today, New Jersey sits at the top of the EPA's national priorities list with 115 federal Superfund sites, the most of any state. It's the toxic shadow of the Garden State's past, a place that fueled American industry, armed the military, refined the East Coast, and did it all in the most densely populated state in the country. This is the story of how the Garden State became home to some of the most contaminated land and rivers in the United States. For most of the 20th century, New Jersey was exactly where you'd put a factory if you wanted output fast. Between New York and Philadelphia, crisscrossed by rail lines, highways, and shipping lanes, the state became a corridor of refineries, chemical plants, and manufacturing hubs. Environmental laws were weak, oversight was almost non-existent, and for decades the waste from these operations was simply dumped into swamps, creeks, pits, or directly into the rivers. It wasn't considered dangerous, it was just how things were done. Now that buried waste is still leaking into the ground beneath people's feet. Take the Kin-Buc Landfill in Edison. What looked like a simple dump was one of the country's largest toxic landfills. From the 1940s to the mid-1970s, it accepted tens of millions of gallons of industrial waste. Oil sludges, chemical byproducts, even liquid toxins poured directly into unlined pits. PCBs and hazardous compounds seeped into Martins Creek and eventually the Raritan River, contaminating a waterway that runs through multiple counties. The site finally shut down in 1977, but the cleanup took decades. Even today, the landfill is capped, monitored, and controlled so those buried chemicals don't escape again. Or look at Imperial Oil in Marlboro Township, a 15-acre facility whose operations began in 1912. For decades, it handled arsenic, waste oil, and chemical blending. By the time investigators arrived, the soil and groundwater held PCBs, heavy metals, volatile organic compounds, petroleum hydrocarbons, and other dangerous contaminants. Pollution spread into wetlands and creeks, and even reached the Englishtown aquifer, a major source of drinking water. Cleanup took more than 25 years, soil removal, water treatment, and constant monitoring, before officials could declare the site largely remediated. And then there's American Cyanamid in Bridgewater, a sprawling chemical and pharmaceutical complex operating for nearly a century. Waste sat in lagoons and impoundments, slowly seeping into the earth. In 1983, it was declared a Superfund site. Nearly 30 years later, in 2011, Hurricane Irene flooded part of the property, releasing benzene, a known carcinogen, into surrounding areas. Cleanup became even more urgent. Engineers raised berms, built treatment systems, and launched a massive, years-long remediation effort. Some parts of the property have been rebuilt into new commercial projects, but large sections remain under long-term cleanup. But no New Jersey Superfund site is more infamous than Diamond Alkali in Newark's Ironbound section. From the 1950s to the late 1960s, the plant manufactured pesticides, including the herbicide used in Agent Orange. The byproduct was dioxin, one of the most toxic chemicals known. By the early 1980s, investigators found extreme dioxin contamination in the soil and in the Passaic River, where waste had leaked and been dumped for years. That contamination spread along a 17-mile tidal stretch. Today, the cleanup of the Passaic River is one of the most complex and expensive in EPA history, involving dredging, capping, and long-term restoration. And it isn't just isolated plots of land. Entire river systems have carried the effects of industrial dumping. The lower Raritan River has more than 200 contaminated sites draining into it. In 2022, a 19-mile stretch of the lower Hackensack River was added to the Superfund list. New Jersey's map is dotted not just with towns, but with zones where contamination seeped into soil, groundwater, marshes, and neighborhoods for decades before anyone intervened. In New Jersey, industry arrived early, regulations arrived late, and millions of people now live on top of what those factories left behind. The effects are everywhere. Fish advisories warning residents not to eat their catch, capped fields where nothing can be built, fenced-off lots no one can touch, and neighborhoods that spent years fighting for answers about what was buried beneath their streets. In places like Newark's Ironbound, environmental justice movements grew out of communities boxed in by highways, factories, and pollution. Communities that had no choice but to demand cleanup. And now the pass faces a new threat: extreme weather. Floods and storms like the one that hit American Cyanamid can destabilize old containment systems, re-exposing buried toxins. Rising water levels threaten low-lying sites near rivers and marshes. Old contamination, once sealed away, may not stay buried forever. But Jersey isn't ignoring the problem. The state aggressively lists and identifies contaminated land, which forces responsible companies to pay for cleanup and makes federal money available when they don't. Some sites have been transformed. Old chemical plants turned into stadiums, landfills turned into solar fields, forgotten industrial zones repurposed as commercial developments. Others remain frozen in time, reminders of what happens when progress outpaces caution. New Jersey's Superfund story is a warning about what unchecked industry can leave behind. The Garden State is greener than the headlines suggest, but beneath that green is a second map, one still being cleaned, restored, and defended. And long after the last site is finally removed from the Superfund list, one truth will remain. New Jersey can cap its dumps, dredge its rivers, and detox its past. But it will never again pretend that what we bury today magically disappears tomorrow.